I've given over 3,500 speeches at conventions around the world throughout my career as a professional speaker and author. And a lot of those speeches were big events. Like from 2015 to 2019, well, 2024, I did lecture tours in mainland China. And my lecture tours in 25 major cities were to groups of 1,000 to 3,000 young Chinese adults. And I was talking through an interpreter to these huge arenas full of people for as many as 6 hours a day. We'd break in the morning, break for lunch, and then go on for a total of 6 hours on the platform, speaking to an enormous crowd like that. I've spoken to lots and lots of English-speaking people where I didn't have to have an interpreter, and done that. I was speaking to 5,000 people in Poland at a recent event. I've spoken many times to big events. Here's what I do before a big event. Do you ever watch the old videos of Elvis backstage before he comes out and performs a concert? You know, you got his entourage going down the hallways with him, and he's kind of in his head and walking along and sort of reviewing whatever he reviewed before he went on stage. And then he'd pause and he'd kind of get quiet inside, and then they'd open the curtain and tap him or nod, and he'd go out on stage and he was on, right? Well, I don't do that, but I do something that accomplishes the same thing that he was doing. Now, notice that there's a little bit of a contradiction of expectations here. What you would expect a rock and roll performer to do is be backstage and kind of like a, football team. All right, let us out there. And you're going to go charging onto the field or jumping onto the stage and no. What Elvis would do, and his performances were big, high energy performances, is he would get quiet inside before going on that stage so that he had all of his power ready to explode in whatever way he needed it to. I do a similar thing. What I did in China, which of course I realize that's a hybrid, that's a very rare type of event, but you may be able to learn something from what I did and do. Instead of going backstage, I would go to the back of the audience. So the stage is up here and I'm out there in the back of the audience. And over there, I always had an entourage with me that were security people, because the crowd tends to want to get a selfie with you or want to touch you or shake your hand or something. And so their job was to keep them at bay so I could get to the stage. But they would announce, "Ladies and gentlemen, Jim Cathcart," and the place goes crazy and they're all applauding. And many of them didn't have any idea who I was. They were just joining in the energy of the event, right? And I would start walking down the aisle toward the stage, and all these security people are holding back the crowd. And then I would set out at a dead run. Boom, 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 boom. Just running for the stage. And the security people go, "Oh no, we're supposed to protect him." And they would run. And I was doing it playfully. Now, this wouldn't be appropriate for someone else, but it worked for me. So I would run up to the stage through the crowd, and I might high five a few people on the way there. And when I got to the stage, I'd pause just long enough to be careful about the steps, get up on the stage, and then kind of dance around to the introduction music that they were playing. And by the way, they asked me, "What introductory music would you like to have?" I said, "Ooh, I can have anything I want." "Well, then I want Bob Seger's old-time rock and roll. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Just take those old records off the shelf." So that's what was playing. And I would go up on stage and I'm dancing around and they're all going crazy and applauding. And I'm smiling at them and acknowledging people. And then they settle down. And then I would immediately launch into dialogue with them instead of monologue. Monologue, me talking; dialogue, us conversing. And I would say something like, "Ni hao," and then "Ni hao," which means hello, greetings, I see you. And so I'd get them to respond to me, and then I would make like 2 sentences of Chinese language statements to show them that I understood a little bit about their language and respected them. And then I would say, and now Yingguan. Yingguan means English. And my interpreter would jump in. And so the rest of my talk would be in English. But I did many things in that little process. One, I fed the energy in the room and it fed me at the same time. I showed the group that I was not going to be a stuffy orator that was going to stand there and deliver a message to them. I was going to be a playful, happy person who was there to have a dialogue with them. I showed them that I not only would take questions or comments from the audience, I wanted them, right? And so I'd always start off in a very happy mode. And then I would introduce my subject and I would use a story to get everybody involved. And then I could go into some of the content of learning points. But I would alternate throughout the day stories and learning points, stories and learning points, involvement with dialogue, energy producing things. And it was always a wonderful experience. So what I do in a typical corporate setting, let's say I'm addressing a convention in Atlanta and I've got 500 people in the audience and it's a very business-like setting. I'm backstage instead of on stage at the start or in the back of the audience. There's no entourage. There's not going to be any thunderous applause. It's just polite applause. Welcome our keynote speaker. What I'm doing backstage is I'm listening to what they're saying out there, because I know what they say creates an expectation on the part of the audience. If they create the right expectation, I go with that. If they somehow get it wrong, I can correct that or ignore it and just go into my presentation. And I've had occasions where people decided to get clever with the introduction. And so they tell a dirty joke or they do something inappropriate and then they say, let's welcome our speaker. And so I come out walking into their mess. In that case, I would typically ignore it and just begin the dialogue with the audience. If it's an appropriate introduction, our speaker is the author of this and the other, and he's done better, and he's the right guy for us today, so let's welcome Jim Cathcart. And I come out and I would say, Joseph, thank you for that. That was awesome. Thank you. Hey, welcome to Atlanta. Great to see everybody here. And then I'd immediately go into my subject. So for me, the way I engage with an audience is I want actual engagement. I don't want to go out and deliver the same talk every time in the same way and have a practiced routine, because that's not really public speaking in the way that I see it. That is a performance. And I know some very successful professional speakers who have made millions of dollars with the same exact speech delivered the same exact way every single time. Well, if your show's that good, keep on going. You know, if you're Les Mis or Cats or whatever, keep doing the same show over and over again. People will come back, right? But I'm there to guide them through a learning process. And sometimes I'll walk out onto the stage and I'll say, come here. And I'll notice the whole audience kind of leans forward. And I'll say, let me share something with you. And then I share a thought. Or other times I'll walk out and I'll say, let's think together. If someone said such and such, how would you react? If you were working on whatever, how would you approach it? You know, and I engage them that way. So when I'm getting ready to do what I do as a professional speaker, the main thing I want to do in my mind and heart is be appropriate to the moment. I want to feed the energy that's there if it's good energy. I want to negate or avoid the energy if it's bad energy. Like one time I was introduced, the guy said, ladies and gentlemen, I have some horrible news. Our founder and CEO passed away this weekend. Everybody went, oh, because the founder was loved. And he said, I know, it's horrible. And his widow is here, and she'll be talking with you later. And we're going to hold a prayer vigil, a memorial moment for him later on this morning. But for right now, we have a motivational speaker. Here's Jim Cathcart. Oh my gosh. I mean, the worst thing I could do is come out on stage with high energy. So what I did in that instance is I came out on stage and I said, thank you for that introduction. Gosh, I can feel the impact in this room of learning that your founder has passed. And I'm sorry that happened. And I hate that you have to go through this experience. Could we just have a moment of silence and reverence for him and his family? And then I just stood there and respectfully looked at the audience and took 3 or 4 breaths. And I said, thank you. Now and I moved a little bit off of the place where I was standing to break the energy just a little bit and start a new dialogue. I said, my assignment today is to talk with you about how to motivate a team. So let's look at the concept of motivation. Motive and action. Motivation. And then I launched right into my material. It worked fine, and people thanked me for showing respect for the chairman who had passed. So even if you get bad energy in the room before you come in, you can use that to your advantage and either acknowledge it, avoid it, or convert it into something else. So the main thing I want to do when I get to a meeting, and this can be a little bit annoying, because if you're on my team, you're going to find me on the morning of the presentation 129,000% task focused. When I get to the meeting room, first off, when I get up in the morning, I want to get to the meeting as quickly as possible. Well, we got a breakfast with a couple of our VPs, and we want to talk about not that morning. Okay, I'll meet them after, but not before. Okay. And so I get up in the morning, I have maybe a bowl of oatmeal and a cup of coffee, and I go right to the meeting place. What do I want to do at the meeting place? I want to make sure the lighting works, the staging works, the sound system works, my slides, if I'm using them on PowerPoint, will work. And I want to confirm all of that, then I can relax and be a happy participant. Until that time, I am, okay, is this, all right, I need you to, and would you double check and let me know? Okay, thank you very much. As soon as all that happens, hey, good morning. Hey, we've got a couple of minutes before the program starts. I wanted to ask you a question. And I'm easy to deal with, but until that time, man, I am a man on a mission, and I want to make sure it's going to be right so that I can do my best job. That's what I've found professionals tend to do. I've heard a lot of people over the years criticize top performers. Like years ago, Barbara Streisand, one of the best singers that ever lived. Someone said, oh, she's such a perfectionist. Everything has to be just perfect. Well, excuse me, do you want all of her best or most of her best? I want her to be the best she could possibly be. And that may mean this has got to be the place, if that's where the camera is. This is the microphone she prefers, and that's the placement of it. This is the timing. Let's get everything on the right beat for her singing. Of course she would be a perfectionist. And you and I ought to be as well, but not all the time. Just up to the point that we know, okay, now I can relax and go with what brought me, right? Go with my assignment and do the job well. So that's what people do when they're preparing for a professional performance in a forum that matters a lot to the people who are attending.